The leather vest hung on a hook near the back wall of Ironside MMA, and if you knew what you were looking at, you stopped walking. Most people didn't know. Most people glanced at it the way you glance at a coat in a hallway registered dismissed moved on. But the vest was not a coat. It was a record, a long one. The kind written in thread and iron and years that don't wash out. The top rocker was curved in black letters in old Gothic script that caught the fluorescent light of the gym and threw it back dull. The bottom rocker named a chapter that had once held territory from the California high desert down through 3 counties of scrubland and dust. Between the rockers centered on the back was the main patch, the one that meant the man wearing it had been fully patched for decades. Not a prospect, not a hang-around, but the real thing, the permanent thing. The kind of membership that ends only when the man wearing it decides it does. On the left shoulder, a small diamond. On the chest, crossed pistons worn at the edges from years of road and weather and the accumulated friction of a life lived without apology. The vest hung on the hook because the man who owned it had arrived at 6 in the morning, the same as every morning, had taken it off carefully, folded it once along the center seam and hung it there before walking to the back corner of the gym where the bench was. The bench was just a bench. Wooden slats, metal frame, the kind of thing you'd find at the end of a locker room row. But at Ironside MMA in Tucson, Arizona, that bench had become through some unspoken arrangement that nobody had ever formally agreed to the exclusive territory of one man. There was a folded towel on it, a water bottle, a black neoprene knee brace unstrapped and waiting. The man sitting on that bench was Ray Merritt. He was 68 years old, 6 feet tall, broad through the shoulders in a way that didn't come from a gym. It came from decades of work, real work, the kind that leaves permanent architecture in the body. His arms were still thick, still carved. The muscle settled now into something denser than it had been at 30, like oak that had finished growing and was simply hardening with each passing year. His hair was gray and pulled back in a thin ponytail that reached the collar of his t-shirt. His beard was the same gray, long enough to reach his collarbone, full maintained without vanity. His eyes were pale, not blue exactly, more the color of winter sky on a flat day when there are no clouds but no real light either. They moved slowly and they settled completely. When Ray Merritt looked at something, he looked at it the way a man looks at something he is deciding about, not something he is merely seeing. His left knee was the problem. Had been since March, when the VA orthopedic surgeon at the Davis-Monthan Clinic had replaced the joint entirely, cleaned out 40 years of accumulated damaged cartilage, worn to nothing, bone grinding on bone, the physical record of a life that had not been easy on the body. The surgeon had been direct. The replacement was good work, the best hardware available, but the recovery was the patient's responsibility. Move every day, load the joint carefully. Build the surrounding muscle, or the new hardware would be wasted inside a body that had forgotten how to support it. So Ray came to Ironside, 5 days a week, sometimes 6. He arrived before most of the fighters stretched on the mat for 45 minutes with the patient, deliberate attention of a man who understood that flexibility was not optional at his age, it was survival. Then he rode the stationary bike for 20 minutes. Then he did bodyweight squats and lunges in the corner near his bench, slow and controlled, each rep measured, each movement intentional. He didn't spar, he didn't hit the heavy bags, he didn't work the pads with anyone. He sat on his bench between exercises and he drank his water and he waited for his knee to tell him what it needed. The fighters at Ironside gave him a wide berth, not because anyone had told them to, not because there was a rule about it. They gave him a wide berth, the way that animals in the wild give a wide berth to certain other animals, not out of conscious calculation, but out of something older, something that runs below thought, some deep recognition of a category of creature that operates by different rules. Gus Tanner had been at Ironside since the gym opened 14 years ago. He'd trained fighters at 3 different gyms, before that had worked corners at regional shows across the Southwest, had seen fighters come through who became champions, and fighters who became cautionary tales, and everything in between. He was 57 years old, built lean and hard, with a face that had been lived in thoroughly and gray at his temples, that he'd stopped noticing. He ran the morning sessions at Ironside and knew every fighter in the building by their habits before he knew them by name. He knew Ray Merritt by something else entirely. On the morning Cole Drayden arrived at Ironside, Gus was in the middle of running a conditioning drill with two middleweights near cage 3. He saw Cole come through the door and recognized him immediately, not from having met him, but from having watched tape. Cole Drayden was the kind of fighter who generated tape. Highlight reels, interview clips, post-fight breakdowns. He was 28 years old, welterweight out of a gym in Phoenix, and his record was 18 wins and 0 losses. 12 of those wins had ended before the final bell, and 3 of the 12 had ended in the first round. He was also Gus registered within 30 seconds of watching him walk through the door, exactly the kind of fighter who was going to be a problem in this gym. Not because he was dangerous. Dangerous fighters were welcome at Ironside. The problem was the way Cole Drayden occupied a room. He walked in like he was measuring the place against a standard only he could see, and the standard was himself. He looked at the cages, at the heavy bags along the east wall, at the fighters already working, and the look on his face was the look of a man doing inventory on something that belongs to him. He dropped his bag near the front desk. He shook hands with 2 fighters he apparently already knew. He said something that made them both laugh. Then he turned slowly and looked at the rest of the gym. His eyes found Ray's bench. He looked at it for a moment, looked at the vest on the hook above it, looked at the old man sitting beneath it with the knee brace and the cane leaning against the wall beside him. Something shifted in Cole's expression, not hostility exactly, not yet, but the particular brand of dismissal that young men in excellent physical condition sometimes extend toward old men whose bodies have begun to tell the truth about time. Gus finished the drill with his middleweights, walked them through their cooldown, then crossed the gym floor to where Cole was introducing himself to one of the assistant trainers. "Cole," he said. Cole turned. "Hey, Coach Tanner, good to finally meet you in person." His handshake was firm and his smile was easy, and Gus understood immediately that Cole Drayden had spent years making people like him inside the first 60 seconds. He was good at it. He was the kind of good at it that you only get from practice. "Good to have you here," Gus said. 3 weeks until Vegas. We've got work to do." "I'm ready to work." Cole glanced toward the back of the gym. "Hey, who's the guy on the bench?" Gus followed his glance. "Ray." "Yeah. What's his deal? He a trainer here or something?" "No. He a regular. He's here every day." Cole nodded slowly, working something out. "He take up that whole bench every day." "Yeah." Gus watched Cole's face process this information in a way that Gus did not particularly like. "What's he training for?" "He's not training for anything," Gus said. "He's rehabbing his knee. He had a replacement in the spring. He takes up a whole bench to rehab a knee replacement." It was not a question. It was an editorial comment dressed up as a question, and Gus had been around long enough to know the difference. He said what he said next without raising his voice, without making a thing of it, just putting it on the table the way you put a card down in a game where you want the other player to understand what you're holding before things go any further. "Don't go near him, Cole." Cole looked at Gus. "What? You heard me. Leave him alone. Work your training focus on Vegas and leave that corner of the gym to him." Cole smiled. The smile said, "Okay, old guy, whatever you say." The smile said, "I'm going to be polite about this because I'm 28 and you're 57 and I understand social norms." The smile did not say, "I understand what you just told me and I intend to follow it." Gus knew the difference between those two smiles. He'd seen both of them many times. He turned and walked back to cage 3. That should have been the end of it. It was not the end of it. Cole Drayden trained hard. That part was true and it was real, and Gus gave him full credit for it. He was in the gym 6 days a week from the first day. He ran the stairs at the back of the building before the morning session started. He hit the heavy bags with the kind of consistent technical precision that separated serious fighters from men who were just in love with the idea of fighting. He drilled takedown defense with an attention to detail that told you he'd watched tape on Danny Foss and identified the specific thing Foss liked to do in the second round when he sensed he was ahead on points. The talent was real. Gus had known that before Cole arrived, and watching him work confirmed it. The other thing was also real. Cole talked. He talked when he stretched. He talked when he hit the bag. He talked between rounds in the locker room and at the front desk and in the parking lot at the end of sessions. He had a comment for everything and everyone. His record came up in conversation the way the weather comes up naturally, inevitably, without apparent self-consciousness. The 18 wins, the 12 stoppages, the Vegas fight, the top 10 opponent, the contract that was waiting on the other side of it. Some of the fighters at Ironside found him entertaining. Some found him exhausting. Most had learned within the first week to nod at the right moments and then redirect their attention back to whatever they were actually doing. Ray heard none of it. Or if he heard it, he gave no sign. He sat on his bench and did his work and drank his water, and the current of the gym moved around him, the way a river moves around a stone that has been sitting in it long enough to become part of the geography. Cole noticed this. The fact that Ray did not respond to Cole, not to his presence, not to his reputation, not to his record, not to the easy social electricity that Cole generated wherever he went, registered on Cole as an affront of some kind. Though if you'd asked him to explain exactly why, he wouldn't have been able to articulate it cleanly. It just bothered him. The old man on the bench in the corner bothered him. The complete indifference bothered him. The way Ray seemed to occupy that corner of the gym, as though it had been deeded to him long before Cole Drayden had ever heard of Tucson, bothered him. The cane bothered him. The knee brace bothered him. The vest with its patches that Cole couldn't fully read and hadn't bothered to research bothered him in a way he couldn't quite name. Gus watched all of this from a distance across 10 days. He watched Cole's eyes track toward Ray's bench with increasing frequency. He watched the calculation happening behind Cole's easy smile. He recognized what was coming the way you recognize weather when you've lived in the desert long enough, not from any single sign, but from the way all the signs were pointing in the same direction. On the 11th day, he pulled Cole aside after the afternoon session. "I'm going to say this one more time," he said. Cole looked at him with the expression of a man who is certain he is about to be told something unnecessary. The man in the corner. "Ray, you don't know who he is. That's fine. But I know who he is, and I'm telling you again, leave him alone. He's not part of your prep. He's not a story. He's not a prop. He's here for his knee, and you're here for Vegas, and those two things don't need to intersect." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Does he know who I am?" "No," Gus said, "and that's not going to change." Cole nodded, said sure, said he understood, picked up his bag and walked out to the parking lot. Gus watched him go. He stood at the front desk for a long moment, looking at Ray's bench at the back of the gym, the vest on the hook, the cane against the wall, the water bottle sitting where it always sat. Ray had already left for the day. The bench sat empty in the afternoon light. Gus had a feeling he was not going to be able to stop what was coming. He'd had that feeling before about other situations, and he'd learned over 57 years to pay attention to it. The day it happened was a Tuesday. The gym was about half full. Early afternoon, the overhead lights on the big fans in the rafters, running at medium speed and moving the hot Tucson air around without meaningfully cooling it. 6 of the heavy bags were occupied. 2 of the smaller practice cages had fighters working inside them. The long row of mirrors along the west wall reflected movement and light in overlapping layers. Cole had been on one of the bags along the east wall for 45 minutes. He was at the end of a hard session, his shirt soaked through his hands, still wrapped gloves off the adrenaline of the work still humming in him. He was in that state that intense physical training produces in young men who are very good at something and know it, a state where the body is flooded and the ego is unchecked, and the distance between a thought and an action gets very short. He was also louder than usual. He'd been louder than usual for the past hour, and the other fighters in the gym had been gradually redistributing themselves to the parts of the building that were farthest from him. Ray was on his bench, untying his shoes. He'd finished his session, the squats, the lunges, the bike, and he was winding down, and his left knee was telling him about it in the quiet, persistent way it had of telling him things since March. He was focused on the knot in his left shoe, which had gotten tighter than he'd intended, and he was working it loose with patient fingers when he became aware that someone had stopped in front of him. He didn't look up. He finished working the knot. "Hey, old-timer." Ray got the left shoe sorted, started on the right. "I'm talking to you." Ray finished with the right shoe set, both feet flat on the floor, and looked up. The young man standing in front of him was everything the tape had suggested, and a few things the tape hadn't captured: the size of him, the coiled stillness of a body that spent all its time in motion, the way physical confidence looks on a person who has never been seriously tested and doesn't know it yet. "What can I do for you, son?" It wasn't quite a question. It was an acknowledgement that the young man existed and had apparently decided to involve himself in Ray's afternoon, and Ray was willing to hear why. "Yeah, so?" Cole put his hands on his hips. "I've been watching you. Every day you come in here, sit on this bench, drink your water. And I've been asking myself," I said, "there's a man who used to do this. I can see it. You got that look." Ray waited. "So I figured today's the day." "Today's the day for what?" "For us to work a little. Spar, nothing crazy. You used to do this, right? Back in the day. I can see it in the way you sit, the way you watch the room." Ray said, "No, thank you. Come on. I'll go easy. I won't even use my hands above the waist. We'll just move around a little, touch a little. You'll have something to tell your grandkids." I said no thank you. Gus had seen it starting from across the gym. He was moving now, not fast, but moving, navigating the space between cage 2 and the bag rack, keeping his pace measured because he knew from long experience that rushing toward a situation like this could accelerate it as easily as stop it. Cole leaned slightly forward, dropped his voice, adopted the tone of a man sharing something private. "Look, I'll be straight with you. I got a big fight coming. Vegas, top 10. If I win this one, I'm in line for a major contract. I've been in this gym 3 weeks, and the guys here, they hold back. They're careful with me. They don't want to hurt me. They don't want me to hurt them. It's just not real work. And you, I don't know what it is, but you don't give off that vibe. You don't look scared. So I figured maybe you could help me out. Old school, right? Just us on the mat." Ray looked past Cole for a moment. He looked at the two training partners who had stopped what they were doing and were watching from near the bags. He looked at Gus, who had slowed to a stop about 10 feet away, reading the situation. He looked back at Cole. "Son," he said, "you are going to get yourself into trouble one day. I don't want to be the man who teaches you the lesson. Find somebody your own age." Cole heard this differently than Ray had said it. Cole heard, "I'm too old for this." Cole heard, "You intimidate me." Cole heard, "I'm soft and I'm looking for a way out of this conversation." And in that moment, with two of his training partners watching and half the gym slowly tuning in, Cole did what 28-year-old men do when their ego gets louder than their judgment. He pushed. "Nah," he said. "See, that's the thing. You are my age in your own head. I can tell. You sit there in that little vest like you're somebody. Like this bench is your throne, and everybody in this gym just goes around you because, what? Because you're old, because you're supposed to be scary. Come on, stand up. Show me something." The gym had gone quiet. Not suddenly, it had gone quiet the way rooms go quiet when the temperature changes gradually and then completely. The bags along the east wall were still. The fighters in the cages had stopped moving. Even the fans in the rafters seemed to have become part of the background. Gus was 3 steps away. He stopped. He did not move forward. He had seen something in Ray's face that told him not to. Ray was already standing. He stood up slowly, carefully, with the deliberate movement of a man whose body requires deliberation. He took a moment, once he was upright, to settle his weight, to let the left knee find its position. He rolled his shoulders once, twice. The motion was unhurried. Everything about him was unhurried. "All right." Cole's grin spread wide. "All right, what?" "All right, let's spar." The sound that went around the gym was not quite a gasp. It was the sound that a room full of people makes when they all stop breathing at precisely the same moment. Cole backed toward the center mat, the small one, 12 by 12 feet of blue canvas near the back of the gym. No fence, no cage, just open space, and he was already bouncing on his toes, already shaking out his shoulders, already performing for the audience that had assembled itself around the edges of the room. "Come on," he said. "Old school, right here. I respect it." Ray walked toward the mat, and here was the first thing. Here was the thing that the younger fighters in the gym would remember later and describe to each other trying to get it right. He moved like an old man. He moved exactly like an old man with a bad knee. The slight list to the left side, the way his weight favored the right, the careful placement of each step. He reached the edge of the mat and bent down slowly to adjust the brace on his knee, pulling the Velcro tighter, pressing the neoprene flat against the joint. He straightened up, rolled his shoulders again. Cole had turned to his training partners, both hands raised, expression bright with the shared joke of it. "Y'all seeing this?" The training partners laughed. A couple of other fighters near the back laughed. Gus, standing at the edge of the mat, now allowed himself a small movement that was less amusement than resignation. The resignation of a man who has tried to prevent something and is now watching it happen anyway and knows that some things can only be learned one way. Cole turned back to face Ray and took up his stance. Front foot light, back foot, coiled hands high. He rolled his neck. He threw two loose jabs into the empty air between them, testing nothing but his own rhythm. Ray stood in the center of the mat, both feet flat, hands at his sides, watching. He looked in that moment exactly like a man who was about to be embarrassed. The younger fighters near the back had their phones out. One of them was already recording. This was going to be a clip. This was going to be the thing they showed later, replaying it, laughing the old man going over. That was what the room believed. Ray reached down. He unstrapped the knee brace. He pulled it off. He held it for a moment, then tossed it to the edge of the mat where it landed with a soft thump against the canvas. And then he stood up differently. That was the moment. Not a dramatic moment. No music swelled, no one shouted, nothing visible. Change except the way a man was standing. But the fighters in that room who had real experience, who had been around long enough to see the full range of what a trained human body looks like when it organizes itself for a specific purpose, they all felt it at the same time. Like a frequency shift. Like a room that had been at one temperature suddenly being at another. The limp was gone. The weight had shifted equally to both legs. The shoulders had dropped into a settled position that had nothing to do with the casual posture of a moment before. The chin was slightly tucked. The angle of the back foot was precise. The bend in the lead knee was not the defensive crouch of a combat sport fighter, but something older, something more fundamental, something that had been designed not for competition, but for the other thing entirely. Gus took one step backward. He recognized what he was looking at. He had seen it once before a long time ago, and he had not forgotten it. Cole didn't recognize it. Cole saw an old man who had taken off his knee brace, which to Cole meant the old man was about to embarrass himself even more completely. The grin held. "All right, Pop, light contact. Don't go to the head. I don't want to hurt you." Ray said nothing. He waited. Cole moved first. He always moved first. It was his style, his temperament, his record of success. Pressure forward, cut the space force. The exchange win the exchange. 18 fights, same approach. 18 wins. He threw a stiff jab. Aimed at the center of Ray's face, technically clean, delivered with the full weight transfer of a man who had thrown this punch 10,000 times and knew exactly where it was going. It went nowhere near Ray's face. Ray had moved his head approximately 4 inches. Not dramatically, not with any wasted motion, just a small, precise shift that put his temple completely outside the path of the punch. The fist passed through empty air. In the same motion, the exact same motion, indistinguishable from the head movement, as though they were part of a single continuous action, Ray's right hand had come up and wrapped around Cole's extended wrist. Not hard, not violent. The way you close your hand around a door handle. Just a hand wrapping around a wrist with the calm of someone who has done this so many times that the body does it before the mind finishes deciding to. Then Ray pulled. A small pull. A suggestion more than a force. Cole felt his balance move before he understood why. His front foot came forward when it shouldn't have. His shoulder rotated when it shouldn't have. He found himself offline, leaning his ribs open to anything that wanted to arrive there. He'd been in this position before in training, and he knew what was supposed to come next. A knee to the body, a short elbow, something fast and hard to punish the mistake. Nothing like that came. What came was Ray's left hand open flat landing on the back of Cole's neck. Light, not close to a strike. The way you'd rest a hand on someone's neck to steer them gently through a doorway. And it steered Cole down forward toward the mat, walking him through 3 small controlled steps, the way you walk a horse, the way you guide something without forcing it, and then set him gently onto his knees in the center of the blue canvas. Cole looked up. Ray was already stepping back. Cole was on his knees in the middle of the mat, and Ray was 2 steps away, standing easy, not breathing hard. The exchange had taken 4 seconds. Cole stood up. His face had changed. The grin was gone. Something tight and confused had replaced it. Not anger yet, but the early form of something that would become anger if the confusion didn't get resolved. "All right," he said. "All right, I wasn't set." Ray nodded, said nothing. Cole reset his stance. He told himself the story: the old man got lucky. The old man used a trick. I wasn't ready. I underestimated him. I won't underestimate him again. He moved in slower this time. He threw a feint with the lead hand to set up the thing he actually wanted the takedown, the double leg low and fast, the shot that had ended 6 of his professional fights. His shoulder drove into Ray's hip. His arms wrapped around the backs of Ray's thighs. His legs loaded and drove forward with everything he had. Ray did not go down. Cole's shoulder was driving into a hip that was not moving. His arms were wrapped around legs that felt as though they had been planted into the floor. He drove harder. He loaded more. He put everything into it. Nothing. And then Cole was on the ground. He could not have explained exactly what had happened. Ray had not lifted him. Ray had not slammed him. Ray had turned a small turn a few degrees, a rotation of the hips that had taken his body out of the line of force, and gravity had finished the work. Cole's own momentum had carried him past the point of no return and into the mat face down. Before he could get his hands under him, Ray was on his back, knees on either side, one arm across the back of Cole's neck, the other hand resting, not gripping, just resting on Cole's wrist. Tap. Cole tapped. Ray got up, stood back. The gym was watching. Nobody said anything. The 2 conversations that had been continuing near the front desk had stopped. Cole stood. He was somewhere he had never been before in a gym. He had been hit harder. He had been put on the ground harder. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that he could not read what had just happened. He was a fighter. He understood fighting. He could watch a man for 30 seconds and tell you his weak side, his lazy hand, his bad habits. He could break down tape on an opponent and have a game plan built inside an hour. He had watched Ray through 2 exchanges, and he had nothing. No red, no pattern, no plan. And the other thing, the thing that was working at the back of his mind in a way he couldn't quite silence, was that Ray hadn't done anything. No punch, no kick, no elbow, no knee. He had not in any moment of those 8 seconds attempted to hurt Cole. He had simply put him on the ground twice. The way you set down something you're carrying. Cole's ego told him one more. Best of 3. His subconscious was already doing different math. The subconscious math said this man knows things you have never encountered. This man is not what you thought he was. This man is not in any category you have. Cole didn't listen to the subconscious math. He set his stance a 3rd time. Best of 3. Ray looked at him. Those gray eyes settled on him without heat or impatience. Son, walk away. Best of 3. Ray was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded once. All right. This time Cole did not move first. He had learned that much. He held his stance, hands up, and he waited. He breathed. He watched. Ray stood in the center of the mat, hands at his sides, and he did not move. 5 seconds. 10. The gym was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning was audible. Nobody had started new music after the last track ended. Someone near the front desk had turned off the speakers without being asked. Cole could not wait. Waiting was not in him. He moved. He threw a low-kick shin to Ray's lead leg, a setup meant to load the next combination. His shin made solid contact with muscle. He felt the impact register. He thought I heard him. I felt that land. Ray did not flinch, did not shift his weight. His leg did not move. Cole was already throwing the follow-up, the high kick, his right leg arcing up toward Ray's temple, the full weight of the combination behind it. Ray dropped his head. Not far, not dramatically. A small, precise reduction of his height, 4 or 5 inches, enough for the kick to pass entirely over him. And in the half second of that recovery, while Cole's right foot was still at the apex of its arc, while his weight was fully committed to the planted left leg, Ray moved. Not away. Forward. He stepped in. His shoulder found Cole's chest. His foot hooked behind Cole's planted ankle. Cole went down hard, not the controlled descent of the first two exchanges, not the guided fall, but the kind of takedown where the world rotates 90 degrees in a quarter of a second and your back finds the canvas before your mind catches up to what your body is doing. Cole's shoulder blades hit the mat. The air left his lungs in one short, involuntary burst. Ray came down with him, but not the way another fighter would have come down. The position Ray settled into was one that Cole had never seen. One knee planted in Cole's solar plexus below the ribs, placed with an exactness that made full breathing impossible without being crushing. The other knee on the inside of Cole's hip, blocking any bridge. Ray's right forearm lay across Cole's throat sideways, the blade of the wrist resting against the carotid with a pressure that communicated its point precisely and without ambiguity. Ray's left hand was flat on Cole's forehead, holding his head still against the canvas. Cole could not move, not a little, not in any direction. If he tried to bridge the knee at his hip, stopped him. If he tried to turn the knee at his solar plexus, shifted with him. If he tried to push the forearm away, the hand on his forehead kept his head pinned so that any movement of his arms only wasted oxygen. The pressure on the carotid was not enough to make him lose consciousness. It was exactly enough to make clear with complete authority that it could be. That the difference between where things were and where they could go was entirely within the control of one person, and that person was not Cole. He looked up. Ray's face was directly above his. The gray beard, the pale eyes. There was no anger in those eyes, no satisfaction, no cruelty. There was the same expression Ray had on the bench when he was untying his shoes. A man attending to something that required his attention. A man at work. Nothing more. Ray said very quietly, "Tap." Cole tapped. Ray held the position for one more second. Long enough for Cole to understand what that second meant. Long enough for the understanding to move from the brain into the body, into the chest, into something that would not wash out with the sweat on the drive home. Then Ray released him, stood up, stepped back. The total time from the low kick to the tap was 7 seconds. Added to the previous 2 exchanges, the full 3 rounds had taken 15 seconds. Cole lay on his back on the blue canvas and did not get up right away. He looked at the lights in the ceiling, the fluorescent banks, the industrial fixtures, the afternoon light pressing through the high windows along the south wall. He breathed in the short, careful way you breathe when your ribs have been reminded that they exist. His throat was complaining. His ego was somewhere below the mat in a place he had never had to retrieve it from before. The gym was silent, 23 people, maybe 25. Not one sound from any of them. No bags being worked. No feet on canvas. The fans ran. The lights hummed. That was all. It was the silence of a large group of people realizing simultaneously that they had all held the same assumption, and the assumption had been wrong. Not a little wrong. Completely wrong. The kind of wrong that doesn't let you quietly revise your position, the kind that requires you to sit with the fact that you missed something obvious, something that was there from the beginning, if you'd known how to look. Ray reached down. Cole looked at the hand for a moment, then he took it. Ray pulled him to his feet smoothly, The grip built from decades of actual work, nothing decorative about it. They stood facing each other. Cole didn't know what to do with his eyes. He settled them somewhere around Ray's collarbone. Ray nodded once. Then he walked off the mat without another word. He went back to his bench. He sat down. He picked up the knee brace and began putting it back on, working the Velcro, methodically pulling it tight across the joint. The limp returned the moment his feet touched the floor off the mat, came back like a coat he had taken off for a few minutes and was now putting on again. He pulled his cane from behind the bench, set it across his knees, drank from the bottle without comment, watching nothing in particular. Cole stood on the mat. His hands were at his sides and his head was down, and the 15 seconds that had just passed were rearranging something inside him that he didn't yet have language for. Gus walked over. He put a hand on Cole's back, not the firm hand of a trainer making a correction, but the soft hand of a man acknowledging that something real had just happened to someone who hadn't been prepared for it. He walked Cole off the mat and sat him down on the bench across from Ray. 4 feet of empty floor between them. Gus said quietly, "You know who that is?" Cole shook his head. Gus kept his voice low. "That's Ray Merritt. He was Force Recon in the Marine Corps. After his service, he was a hand-to-hand combat instructor for 2 reconnaissance battalions. He taught at Camp Pendleton. Then he left, joined the Angels, and spent 40-plus years not talking about any of it. He's been coming in here every morning since April. I never told you who he was because he doesn't like people to know." Cole was quiet. He looked at Gus, then at Ray, then back at Gus. "You knew." "I knew. You let me do that." Gus took a long, slow breath. "I told you not to go near him. The first day you walked in here, I told you. You didn't listen." Cole was quiet for a long time. The gym around them was slowly coming back to itself. Someone started hitting a bag. A trainer called a fighter over to the pads. Music came back on low, someone's playlist, not the one Cole had been playing earlier. The normal sound of the place reassembled in pieces, but quieter than before. Half the people in the gym were still glancing toward Ray every 30 seconds or so. The other half were studiously not looking at him, which was its own kind of attention. Ray finished his water, wiped his beard with the back of his hand, set the empty bottle in his bag. He stood up carefully with the cane and began moving toward the door. He stopped when he reached Cole's bench. Cole looked up. Ray put one hand on Cole's shoulder, light the same placement he'd used on the back of Cole's neck on the mat. Not a grip, not a demonstration, just contact. A person acknowledging another person. He said quietly enough that only Cole could hear, "You're going to be a champion, son. I can see it. You've got the body for it. You've got the work. But you've been told you're the best for too long. The best fighters I ever knew, and I knew some, they never said it out loud. They never had to. The people in the room could already feel it. You don't need to tell them. You just need to be it." He squeezed the shoulder once. Then he lifted his hand. He picked up his vest from the hook beside the door. He put it on over his t-shirt, one arm, then the other, settling it across his broad shoulders. The leather creaked. The patches caught the fluorescent light for a moment and threw it back dull. Then Ray Merritt walked out of Ironside MMA, one careful step at a time. His cane in his right hand, the door swinging shut behind him. Cole watched him go. He sat on that bench for a long time after the door closed. He didn't move when 2 of his training partners came over to check on him. He didn't answer their questions. He wasn't being rude. He just wasn't there yet, wasn't back in the room in the way that would allow for ordinary conversation. Eventually he got up. He walked back to the heavy bag he'd been working before all of this started, the one with the split seam near the bottom, the one he'd been hitting hardest all afternoon. He stood in front of it. He put one hand flat against the leather and pressed his forehead against it and stood like that for a full minute, maybe longer. Then he stepped back. He raised his hands. He started over. He came back the next morning. That was the first thing. That was the thing nobody at Ironside had been entirely certain about, whether Cole Drayden would walk back through that door after what had happened on the blue mat, or whether the parking lot would be the last they saw of him. His bag gone from the locker he'd claimed near the back. His name quietly removed from the schedule. The whole episode folded into the category of things that happened at gyms and were never fully discussed afterward. He came back at 6:15 before the morning session started, before most of the fighters had arrived. He came in through the side door, dropped his bag at the bench near cage 2, and began stretching on the mat without speaking to anyone. No greeting at the front desk, no easy smile for the assistant trainer running the early equipment check. No commentary on the weather or the traffic or the quality of the coffee from the place down the block that he'd been recommending to everyone for 3 weeks. He stretched in silence for 30 minutes. Then he worked the bike. Then he started on the bags. The gym filled up around him. Fighters came in, noticed the change immediately, not through anything Cole said, but through everything he didn't. The absence of the running commentary was loud in its own way, louder than the commentary itself had ever been, because the commentary had become the texture of the place over the past 3 weeks. And now the texture was different, and everyone felt it without knowing exactly how to name it. Gus noticed it from the front. He watched Cole work the bags with the same technical precision as always, the same clean mechanics, the same commitment. But there was something underneath the technique that was different, a quality of attention that hadn't been there before. The kind of attention that a man brings to something when he has just been shown clearly and without ambiguity that he doesn't understand it as well as he thought he did. Ray arrived at his usual time. 8:15 through the main door, vest on, cane in his right hand, the slight list to the left side that belonged to the knee on bad days. He nodded to the woman at the front desk, the same nod he gave every morning, and walked toward his bench at the back of the gym. He did not look at Cole as he passed. Cole stopped working the bag. Ray set his vest on the hook. He sat down on the bench. He pulled the water bottle from his bag, set it beside him. He reached for the knee brace. Cole walked over. He walked over the way you walk towards something you're not certain about, deliberate, each step placed with care. He stopped a few feet from the bench. Ray was working the Velcro on the brace and had not looked up. The gym was paying attention. Not obviously, nobody had stopped working, nobody had turned around fully, but the quality of attention in the room had shifted in the way it shifts when people are listening without appearing to listen. Cole said, "I owe you an apology." Ray continued with the knee brace. "What I said yesterday," Cole said, "the way I talked to you, that wasn't right. I knew it while I was saying it, and I said it anyway. So I'm sorry." Ray finished with the brace. He set his foot flat on the floor, tested the joint with a small shift of weight, adjusted the Velcro one more time. "Sit down," he said. Cole sat on the bench. Not right next to Ray, there was a foot of space between them, but on the same bench, in the same corner, facing the same direction. They sat like that for a moment. The gym moved around them. "I'd like to learn," Cole said, "what you know, what you were doing yesterday. I've been fighting since I was 17, and I don't have a word for what I saw, what I felt. I've never encountered anything like it, and I'd like to understand it." Ray was quiet for long enough that Cole began to think the answer was going to be no, and to think about what he would do with that answer, and to realize he didn't have a good response to it and would have to accept it. Then Ray said, 3 days a week. After your regular training is done, you bring water and you bring patience. He paused. We start with how to stand. Cole waited. He thought Ray was going to say more, going to add something about what came after the standing, what the arc of it looked like, what the destination was. Ray didn't say anything else. How long does that take, Cole said, learning to stand. Ray looked at him for the first time since Cole had sat down. Those gray eyes settled on him with the same quality of attention they'd had on the mat, not measuring exactly, but fully present the look of a man who is not anywhere else. Depends on you, he said. Cole nodded. All right. He came back 3 days later after his afternoon session, when most of the other fighters had cleared out and the gym had gone to its quieter evening state. Ray was on the mat in the back corner, not his bench, but the open mat space beside it, standing with both feet flat and his hands at his sides. Cole walked over and stood a few feet away and waited. Ray looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "Show me how you stand." Cole set his stance. The MMA stance he'd been using for 10 years, front foot, angled rear foot, cocked knees, bent weight, distributed 60-40 between rear and front hands, up, chin down. It was a good stance. It was technically sound. It was exactly what it was supposed to be. Ray walked around him slowly. He looked at Cole's feet. He looked at the angle of the hips, the position of the spine, the set of the shoulders. He crouched down carefully, watching the left knee, and looked at the placement of Cole's rear foot. He stood back up. He said again, "But don't show me your fight stance. Just stand." Cole dropped his hands, put his feet roughly shoulder-width apart. Normal standing, the way anyone stands. Ray walked around him again, slower this time. "Where's your weight?" he said. Cole thought about it. "On my heels, I guess." "Mostly." "Everywhere you're not is where you're weak," Ray said. "Stand on your whole foot. Every part of the sole in contact with the floor. Feel the floor." Cole adjusted. It felt strange, too much like stillness, like the opposite of being ready. "Now," Ray said, "don't change your feet. Just notice where your weight is now. Notice what's different." Cole noticed. He didn't say anything about it because there wasn't much to say. It was a small physical adjustment that produced a small physical sensation. He'd expected something more dramatic from a man who had put him on the mat 3 times in 15 seconds. He did not say this out loud. They spent 40 minutes on this. Ray would say something brief and specific. Cole would adjust. Ray would watch. Ray would say something else. The adjustments were small. The attention required to make them and maintain them was not small. By the end of the 40 minutes, Cole's legs were tired in a way they hadn't been tired after any of his regular sessions. Not from exertion, from sustained specific awareness. From being present in his body in a way he apparently was not usually present. "Good," Ray said finally. "That's it," Cole said, "for today." Cole drank from his water bottle. He looked at Ray. "You're going to tell me we do this for weeks, aren't you?" Ray said nothing. But the thing happened at the corners of his eyes, the thing that was not quite a smile, more the physical memory of smiling, a trace of warmth in a face that had learned to keep warmth in reserve. Cole came back on Thursday and the following Monday, and the Thursday after that. The sessions were always the same length, 40 minutes, sometimes 45, never longer. Ray would give him something to work with. Sometimes it was a physical adjustment, a change in the angle of his hips, or the placement of his rear foot, or the relationship between his shoulder and his chin. Sometimes it was a concept. Ray would say something brief, and Cole would have to figure out what to do with it physically, what it meant in the body rather than in the mind. After the third week, Ray added the first movement. Not a technique, not a strike or a takedown or anything from any system Cole recognized. Just a step, a specific kind of step that moved his weight from one position to another without changing his relationship to the floor. Cole drilled it for 20 minutes the first session. He drilled it for another 20 minutes the second session. By the third session, he could do it without thinking about it. "All right," Ray said, watching him do it. "Now we can start." Start what Cole said. Ray's eyes moved to the left, the nearly smile again. He didn't answer. The weeks settled into a rhythm. Cole's regular training with Gus and the other fighters in the morning and afternoon. The sessions with Ray 3 evenings a week in the back corner of the gym on the open mat beside the bench. The rest of the gym had stopped paying obvious attention to what happened in that corner, or had learned to pay attention without showing it, which was different. Cole was quieter. This was noticed by everyone and commented on by almost no one, because the people at Ironside had learned that commenting on things Cole Drayden did tended to result in Cole Drayden talking about them at length, and the new quiet was preferable to the old volume. Gus noticed it and said nothing, and was glad. Cole's regular training improved. The improvement wasn't in his technique. His technique had always been good. It was in the quality of his attention during sparring. He was waiting more. He was reading more before he moved. He was making decisions later in exchanges closer to the moment of commitment, which meant he was making better decisions because he had more information. 2 of the middleweights who sparred with him regularly told each other after a Wednesday session, that Cole was doing something different, and they couldn't identify what it was. What it was that he was learning how to stand. The Vegas fight was 12 weeks out when the sessions with Ray began. Then 11, then 10. The countdown ran as a constant in Cole's mind throughout in his regular training and his evening sessions with Ray, in the hours between when he was eating or driving or lying awake at night working through things. He was thinking about Danny Foss. Foss was a technically sound fighter with a strong wrestling base and a right hand that had ended 4 of his 9 professional wins. He liked to pressure. He liked to make the fight ugly and crowded. He talked in the pre-fight media a lot confidently the way fighters talk when they believe the words are part of the weapon. Cole had been Danny Foss 6 weeks ago. He understood this now in a way he hadn't understood it before. It was a Tuesday evening in the 7th week when the thing happened that Ray had not planned and Cole had not seen coming. The session had gone long 50 minutes instead of 40 because Ray had introduced something new and Cole had needed more time with it than usual. The gym had cleared out mostly a few fighters still working in cage 1 near the front, the assistant trainer locking up the equipment room. The overhead lights were on half power in the back section the way they went after 8 in the evening. Ray had been showing Cole something about pressure, not physical pressure, but the use of stillness as a form of pressure. The way that not moving could force the other person to move, could make the space between two people into something that only one of them was managing. It was abstract the way many of the things Ray taught were abstract, and Cole had been struggling with it, trying to locate the concept in his body rather than his head. They had stopped for water. They were standing at the edge of the mat, not talking. Cole was working through what Ray had shown him, feeling the idea settle or not settle. He became aware that Ray had gone somewhere. Not physically, Ray was standing beside him, water bottle in hand. But some quality of presence had changed. Ray was looking at the east wall at the heavy bags hanging still on their chains, but he wasn't seeing them. He was somewhere else entirely. His right hand held the water bottle, and his left hand was at his side and his left hand was closed. Cole had seen hands closed like that before. He'd seen it in himself before bad fights, when the adrenaline was running and the body was doing things the mind hadn't authorized. He'd seen it in older fighters in the years after they'd stopped competing, when something triggered the physical memory of what the body used to know. Ray's hand was closed and his eyes were on the east wall, and he was somewhere that was not a gym in Tucson in the 7th week before a Vegas fight. Cole did not ask. He understood without knowing the specifics that asking was not what this moment required. He stood beside Ray and looked at the east wall too, at the heavy bags in the half-light, and he waited. After a moment, Ray's left hand opened. He took a long drink from the bottle. He said without looking at Cole, "A man I knew, a long time ago. He was good, better than me probably in most ways." Cole waited. He had one habit, Ray said. When he knew something was coming, when the situation was building toward the thing you couldn't stop, he'd talk. Not to communicate, just to let the pressure out, to do something with the energy instead of holding it. Ray was quiet for a beat. Didn't help him, he said. Couldn't help him. When the 2 seconds came, he'd already spent himself on the words. He capped the bottle. The thing about 2 seconds, he said, is that they're the same length whether you've been talking or whether you've been quiet. But what you've got in them is different. Cole was looking at the side of Ray's face, the gray beard, the still profile. "What happened to him?" Cole said. Ray looked at the bags for a long moment. "Beirut," he said. 1983. October. He didn't say anything else about it. He didn't need to. Cole knew enough history to know what October 1983 in Beirut meant. He didn't know the specifics of what Ray had been there for, or what Ray had done, or what Ray had seen, and he understood that the specifics were not on offer. What was on offer was exactly what had been said. The lesson was in the words, not behind them. Cole already had it. Cole thought about the pre-fight pressers he'd done over the years, the things he'd said in gyms, the commentary, the running account of his own excellence. He thought about the Tuesday 3 weeks ago when he'd stood in front of Ray's bench with his hands on his hips and his mouth moving. He thought about the words and what they'd been for and what they'd cost him, not in any concrete sense, but in the sense of what he'd been spending them on when he could have been quiet. He didn't say any of this out loud. They finished the session. Ray showed him two more things before they stopped. Cole drilled them both until Ray said enough and they cleared the mat. Walking toward the door, Cole said, "Can I ask you something?" Ray walked beside him, the cane in his right hand, the slight lean to the left. "You could have stopped it," Cole said. "The first day, not just on the mat, before that. You could have said something, told me who you were, told me what your background was, told Gus to tell me. Any of that would have stopped it." Ray pushed open the side door. The evening air came in dry and warm, the Tucson desert still holding the day's heat at 8:30. "Yes," Ray said. "Why didn't you?" Ray stepped out onto the concrete apron looking at the parking lot, the lights of the strip mall across the street, the dark sky above the mountains to the east. "Because it wouldn't have been useful," he said, "and because you wouldn't have believed it." He started toward his truck. Cole stood in the doorway. "Ray," he said. Ray stopped, didn't turn around. "I'm sorry it took." "What it took," Cole said. Ray was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Most things do." He walked to his truck. It was old, a Ford dark blue, the kind of truck that accumulated years, the way men accumulated scars without trying and without apology. Ray got in. The engine turned over on the first try. The headlights came on. He pulled out of the lot and turned east and was gone. Cole stood in the doorway for a while after the taillights disappeared. The dry air moved over him and the strip mall lights buzzed across the street, and somewhere to the south a dog was barking at something that wasn't there. He went back inside and worked the bags alone until the last lights were turned off. The weeks moved. 9 before Vegas. 8. 7. In the 6th week, Cole had the bad session. It came after a strong stretch, 4 days in a row, where everything had been working, where his sparring had that quality of effortless precision that fighters chased and rarely caught, where the evening sessions with Ray were producing things that he could feel settling into place in his body one by one, like tumblers in a lock, finding their position. Then the bad session. He was sparring with a welterweight named Briggs, a solid, unspectacular fighter who worked at Ironside 3 times a week and whose main value in sparring was consistency. He showed up, he didn't deviate. He gave you clean work and straight lines. Cole had sparred with him a dozen times in the past weeks and won every exchange comfortably. On this particular Wednesday afternoon, Briggs caught him twice in the same round with the same right hand. Same angle, same timing, same entry. Cole hadn't seen it either time. After the second one, he felt the familiar crawl of frustration behind his eyes, the irritation of a man who knows he should have seen something and didn't. He pushed the pace for the rest of the round. He pushed it harder than the work called for, harder than was productive, harder than made sense for a Wednesday afternoon sparring session 6 weeks before the biggest fight of his career. He was not working. He was reacting. He was letting the frustration drive the decisions instead of the plan. He knew it. He knew it while it was happening, and he kept doing it anyway. After the session, 2 of the fighters he'd grown close to at Ironside invited him out. There was a place down the road, they said. Good food, nothing crazy, just a couple of hours away from the gym. Come on. Cole went. He didn't drink. He'd been disciplined about that through all 12 weeks of the camp. But he stayed out later than he should have, and he talked more than he should have, and by the end of the evening he was back in something close to the old mode, performing. Entertaining, holding the table, being Cole Drayden, the undefeated welterweight who was going to Las Vegas in 6 weeks. He missed the Thursday session. He texted Gus that evening. Something came up. We'll make up the time. He did not text Ray. Ray did not have a phone that Cole had a number for. This had never been discussed. They met at the gym on the mat, and the rest existed outside of that arrangement. Cole came back on Saturday. He walked into the gym, nodded at the front desk, dropped his bag. Ray was on his bench in the corner, neoprene brace on, working through a set of careful, slow knee bends, loading the joint with deliberate attention. Cole walked over. He stood at the edge of the mat. I missed Thursday, he said. Ray didn't stop the knee bends. He finished the set, Cole counted 8, and then straightened up and rested both hands on his thighs. I know, Ray said. I should have let you know. Ray looked at him. Yes. I had a bad session Wednesday. Briggs got me twice with the same hand, and I chased it, and then I went out with some guys and stayed later than I should have, and I told myself I needed a break, but what I actually needed was to not be in a place where I had to think about the fact that I chased it. Ray was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Sit down." Cole sat on the mat cross-legged in front of the bench. Ray looked at him for a long moment with those pale gray eyes that didn't blink more than necessary. "The two in the session," Ray said. "The ones Briggs put on you." "Yeah. You saw the entry on the first one." "No. You saw it on the second one." Cole thought about it honestly. "Yeah, I did. But you chased anyway." "Yeah." Ray nodded slowly. He said there was a man in my unit who had good hands. Fast, clean, technically very sound. Smarter than most. When things went wrong in training, when somebody got one over on him, he'd go quiet for a day or two. Come back hungrier. Work it out. Cole waited. There was another man, Ray said, who when things went wrong got loud, got busy, filled the space with activity so nobody could see, including himself, that something had gotten through. He let that sit. The loud man, Ray said. What do you think happened to him? Cole looked at the mat. He knew this wasn't a story with a neat ending. He knew it was a story about a habit and where the habit led. He stopped improving, Cole said. Ray said nothing, which was the same as yes. Cole came back the following Monday and Thursday, and the following week all 3 sessions. He did not go out with the guys from the gym again. He was not rigid about it. He didn't make an announcement. He didn't explain himself to anyone. He just stopped doing the thing that wasn't serving him and started doing the thing that was. The sessions deepened. Ray had moved past the foundational work, the standing, the stepping, the weight distribution, and was now showing Cole things that lived at the edge of Cole's comprehension. Not techniques from any system, not sequences that could be drilled and timed and repeated in competition, more like principles. The way water finds a gap, the way a small adjustment in position can multiply force without adding effort. The way absolute stillness at the right moment can make the other person's movement work against them. Cole was good at absorbing physical information. This was one of the things that made him a good fighter. He could feel a concept in the body before he could articulate it in language, and once he felt it, he retained it. But what Ray was showing him challenged even this. Some sessions he left with something new, sitting solid and real in his body available. Other sessions he left with what felt like nothing, a residue of confusion that wouldn't resolve a half-formed thing he couldn't locate. On one of those empty sessions, walking to the parking lot afterward, he said, "I didn't get anything tonight." Ray beside him said, "You got everything tonight." Cole looked at him. "The sessions where you can't find it," Ray said, "are the ones where you're learning something. The body doesn't have a category for yet. It's building the room before it puts anything in it." Cole thought about this on the drive home. He thought about it while he was eating, and while he was stretching, and while he was falling asleep. In the morning, he woke up and went to the gym, and the thing that hadn't been there the night before was there. He did not go back and tell Ray this. He thought Ray already knew. 4 weeks before Vegas, Gus called Cole into the small office near the front desk, a room barely big enough for a desk and 2 chairs. The walls covered in fight posters and training schedules, and a whiteboard with names and dates Cole had added his own name to 2 months ago. Gus sat behind the desk. Cole took the chair. There was something on the desk between them, a manila envelope, thick, the kind that holds something flat and square. "I want to show you something," Gus said. "I've been going back and forth about whether to show you this, and I decided that I should. But I want to be straight with you about it first." Cole waited. This came from a man who knew Ray before Tucson, before the club, before a lot of things. He reached out to me after Ray started coming in here, sent me a copy of this. He said Ray would probably never show it himself, and that someone who was training with Ray ought to know what they were working with. He slid the envelope across the desk. Cole opened it. Inside was a disc and a plastic sleeve, an old format, the kind that required a specific kind of player, but Gus had already set up the laptop on the desk with a compatible drive. Cole slid the disc in. The footage was the color of old video, slightly washed the light quality of a different decade. The edges of the frame less precise than what cameras produce now. The title card at the beginning said, Camp Pendleton, and a date and a designation that meant nothing to Cole, but clearly meant something specific to the people who had made it. The camera was on a large room. Concrete floor, bare walls, overhead lighting that was harsh and flat. A group of men in military clothing sat in a loose formation on the floor, maybe 30 of them, various ages, all watching a man standing at the front of the room. The man was young, 22 or 23, broad through the shoulders, hair short, no beard yet. Built the way Ray was built now, but with the density of youth instead of the density of years. He was standing in the center of the room, both feet flat, hands at his sides. Cole sat forward. The footage had no sound, or the sound was lost to time or equipment. It didn't matter. It wasn't about the sound. The young man at the front of the room began to move, and Cole watched the movement with the full quality of attention that he had been learning to bring to things over the past 7 weeks. The same stance, exactly the same stance, not approximately the same, not recognizably similar, exactly, precisely, identically the same. Every angle, every weight distribution, every relationship between foot and knee and hip and shoulder. 44 years between this footage and the man on the mat at Ironside, and nothing had changed by a single degree. The young Ray in the footage moved through a demonstration of some kind, the men on the floor watching with the attention of people who understood they were seeing something worth watching. Cole could not identify the system. He recognized nothing from MMA, nothing from wrestling, nothing from any of the striking arts he'd trained. It was something older, something built for a purpose more fundamental than competition. The footage ran for 11 minutes. Cole watched all of it without looking away. When it ended, he sat back. He was quiet for a long time. Gus was watching him. He didn't say anything. Finally, Cole said, "He's been doing this for 44 years. Gus nodded. "And it's the same. Exactly the same." Gus nodded again. Cole thought about what you had to have decided about something, what kind of relationship you had to have built with it, what it had to mean to you to carry it through 44 years without it drifting, without the edges rounding off, without convenience or age or the accumulated weight of life bending it into something slightly different. He thought about his own relationship with fighting. How much of it was still what it had been when he started, and how much had been bent and shaped by record and reputation and expectation and the voice in his head that kept the running count of 18-0. He took the disc out of the drive. He put it carefully back in the sleeve, back in the envelope. He handed it to Gus. "Does Ray know you have this?" he said. Gus took the envelope. "No." Cole nodded. "Let's keep it that way." He stood up. He picked up his bag. At the door of the office, he stopped. "The man who sent this to you," he said. "The one who knew Ray. What's his name?" Gus looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "It doesn't matter. He's just somebody who thought somebody ought to know." Cole nodded. He went back to the gym. He worked the bags alone for an hour. He didn't talk to anyone. When the evening session with Ray came, he showed up at the back mat at exactly the right time, and he worked for 45 minutes with the quality of attention that the footage had put in him. The attention of a man who has just been shown what 44 years of commitment looks like, and is now taking a hard inventory of what he himself is actually committed to. Ray noticed. He said nothing about it. But at the end of the session, when they were clearing the mat, Ray looked at Cole with those gray eyes, and something in the look acknowledged what was there without naming it. That was enough. 1 week before Vegas, the last session. Cole arrived at the regular time after his afternoon training, when the gym was settling into its quieter evening rhythm. Ray was already on the mat, already standing, already in the stance that Cole now recognized from the inside, not just visually but physically, because he had been building it in his own body for 7 weeks and could feel the architecture of it when he saw it in someone else. They worked for 40 minutes. Ray showed him one last thing, not a technique, not a principle exactly, but something in between, something that Cole would spend the next week turning over in his hands without fully resolving. He understood it was meant to be that way. Some things were given to you to think about rather than to use directly. When they stopped, Ray stood at the edge of the mat and looked at Cole, the way he looked at things completely with the full weight of his attention. "You're ready," he said. "Not in the way you were ready before, but ready." Cole didn't ask what the difference was. He thought he knew, and he thought that asking would require Ray to say it out loud, and that saying it out loud was somehow less than it was when it sat between them as a shared understanding. He put out his hand. Ray took it. The grip was what it always was, the density of a life's worth of work, nothing extra, nothing performed. They stood like that for a moment. Then Ray released his hand and walked to his bench. He sat down. He picked up his water bottle. He looked at the back wall of the gym in the way he looked at things that weren't there. Cole picked up his bag. He walked toward the door. At the edge of the back section where the light changed, he turned around and looked back. Ray was on the bench, vest on, water bottle in hand, looking at nothing and everything. The cane beside him, the folded towel, the worn wood of the bench that had become over 7 weeks as familiar to Cole as anything in this gym. Cole looked at him for a moment. Then he turned and walked out into the dry Tucson evening, and the door swung shut behind him and Las Vegas was 7 days away. The drive to Las Vegas from Tucson took 6 hours, if you didn't stop a little more if you did. Cole stopped once outside of Phoenix at a gas station where the pumps were old, and the coffee was bad, and the desert spread out flat and endless, in every direction, under a sky that was doing something complicated with the light. He stood outside the car for a few minutes. He didn't check his phone. He didn't put in earbuds. He just stood there with the bad coffee in his hand and looked at the desert and breathed the dry, warm air and let the quiet be quiet. He'd been doing that more, letting quiet be quiet instead of filling it. He got back in the car and drove the rest of the way without music. Vegas was Vegas, the approach from the south on the 93, where the city appears suddenly out of the flat. Nothing, the skyline rising like something that shouldn't exist in this landscape but does, insistently and brilliantly, all light and glass and vertical ambition against the brown horizontal desert. Cole had been to Vegas 3 times before. Twice for fights, once for a training camp his old gym had organized 2 years ago. He knew the particular quality of the place, the way it manufactured urgency, the way everything in it was designed to make you feel that something important was happening right now, and you needed to be part of it or you would miss it. He checked into the hotel the promotion had arranged and went to his room and ate the meal Gus had specified and stretched for 40 minutes on the floor of the room and went to sleep at 10:15. Gus had come up separately, driven by one of the cornermen arriving a day earlier to handle logistics. When Cole came down for the morning run the next day, Gus was in the lobby with coffee, already in the mode that Cole had come to recognize as Gus's fight week mode, quieter than usual, more specific, every word chosen for function rather than atmosphere. "How do you feel?" Gus said. "Good," Cole said. Gus looked at him, not checking for the answer Cole had given, checking for the answer underneath it, the one that lived in the eyes and the shoulders, and the way a fighter occupied the lobby of a fight week hotel. Whatever he saw, he nodded at it. "Good," he said. "Let's run." The weigh-in was the following afternoon. A ballroom in the hotel set up with the scale and the backdrop and the cameras and the small crowd of media and promotional staff and hangers-on that accumulated around these events like weather systems. Cole had done 22 of them, counting amateur shows, and the ritual was so familiar it had become almost mechanical. Strip down step on hit, the number step off. Shake hands with whoever the promotion wanted a photo of. Answer 3 questions for the cameras. He was in the back room with Gus when Danny Foss came in. Cole had watched tape on Foss extensively, more tape than he'd watched on any opponent in his career, partly because Gus had insisted on it, and partly because Foss was genuinely interesting to study. He was 26 years old from a wrestling background at a Division I program in Ohio, who had transitioned to MMA with the technical precision that good wrestlers sometimes brought when they were disciplined enough to build a complete game around the base. His record was 12-2, and the two losses were to fighters currently ranked above him, which meant the losses hadn't damaged his standing so much as confirmed that he was operating near the right level. His right hand was the thing. Gus had identified it early in the camp, and Cole had confirmed it through the tape. Foss liked to set it up off a level change, dropping his level as if initiating a takedown, and then coming back up with the right hand when the opponent dropped their hips in defense. He'd finished 4 fights with it. It was clean, and he was patient with it, and he trusted it completely. Cole thought about Briggs, the Wednesday session 6 weeks ago, the 2 right hands he hadn't seen. He'd spent considerable time since then working specifically on the level change entry, drilling the defensive read until it was reflex rather than decision. Foss walked into the back room with his manager and a training partner, and the energy he brought with him was immediately apparent. He was the kind of fighter who arrived at weigh-ins already performing, already in the character of himself, that he projected to the world already narrating the event from inside his own head in a way that leaked out through his body language and the volume of his voice and the brightness of his smile. He saw Cole and the smile got wider. "There he is," Foss said. 18-0. I've been looking forward to this one. Cole looked at him. He didn't say anything. Foss's smile didn't waver. If anything, it expanded, reading Cole's silence as something to fill. He started talking. He talked about the camp he'd had, the preparation, the specific things he'd worked on. He talked about Cole's record in a way that was complimentary on the surface and dismissive underneath the way fighters sometimes talked about opponents they'd convinced themselves they understood. He talked about Vegas, about the crowd, about the card, about the exposure. Cole listened to all of it. Not performing listening, actually listening with the quality of attention Ray had been building in him for 7 weeks. He heard the words, and he heard what was underneath the words, and he recognized with a clarity that surprised him slightly the specific function the words were serving. Foss was spending himself. Right now in this back room 4 feet from Cole, the day before the fight, Danny Foss was doing exactly what Ray's man had done in Beirut in October of 1983. Filling the space with activity, letting the pressure out through the mouth instead of holding it in the body where it could be used. Cole said nothing. He kept his face neutral. He looked at Foss the way Ray had looked at him on the mat at Ironside, not with heat, not with performance, just with presence. The look of a man who was somewhere fully and was not being moved from that place by anything in the room. Something flickered behind Foss's eyes. A small uncertainty quickly covered. The smile held, but it worked harder to hold. "You always this quiet," he said to Cole. Cole said, "Pretty much." That was all he said. The cameras got their footage. The promotion got their handshake photo. Cole stepped on the scale and hit the number with a pound to spare, and stepped off and answered the 3 questions from the media in complete sentences that contained nothing quotable, and moved on. In the elevator going back up to the room, Gus stood beside Cole and said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "You saw it?" "Yeah," Cole said. Gus nodded. He pressed the button for their floor. The elevator moved. "Good," he said. The fight was at 9:15 the following evening. Cole spent the day the way he always spent fight days, the light movement in the morning, the specific meal at noon, the rest period in the afternoon, that was never actually rest, but was the closest thing available. He lay on the bed in the hotel room and looked at the ceiling and let his mind do what it needed to do. He thought about Ray, not about the techniques, not about the principles, not about any specific thing that had been shown to him on the mat at Ironside over 7 weeks. He thought about the bench, the folded towel, the vest on the hook. He thought about a man who had been something enormous and had chosen to become quiet about it, and what that choice had required and what it had produced over 44 years of daily practice. He thought about what it meant to carry something that long without it drifting, to stay true to a thing not because the world didn't offer other options, but because you had decided this was what was real and you were going to live inside that reality regardless of what else came along. Cole got up at 3:30. He ate the second meal. He stretched. He put on the clothes Gus had laid out and went to meet the corner. The walk to the arena was 4 minutes from the hotel. Cole walked it the way he'd been learning to walk fully on his feet, every part of the soul, in contact with the ground, the weight even, and settled and present. It was a small thing, and it was not a small thing. The dressing room was the dressing room, white walls, a training table. The smell of liniment and anticipation that lived in every dressing room regardless of the venue or the level. Gus wrapped his hands. They went through the game plan one more time briefly, the way you go through something when you both already know it, and the going through is the ritual of confirmation rather than the transfer of information. Cole warmed up. He moved through the combinations on the pads with one of the cornermen and felt the readiness in his body. Not the electric readiness of the young fighter who was managing his nerves, but a different kind, a settled kind. The readiness of a body that has been prepared completely and is now waiting without anxiety for the thing it has been prepared for. The call came. Time to go. The walk to the cage was the thing Cole had done 22 times and could not fully prepare for regardless of the number. The lights, the crowd, the noise of a fight crowd at full volume. Something manufactured and real at the same time, unlike any other sound in the world. He walked through it the way Ray walked through a gym full of people who were watching him without performance, without acknowledgement, without giving any of it more than exactly what it required. He climbed into the cage. He went to his corner. He stood there while the announcements were made and the instructions were given and the protocol of the thing was completed. Foss was across the cage, still performing, still narrating, saying something to his corner, then something to the crowd, then looking across at Cole with the fighter's stare that was meant to communicate something about what was coming. Cole looked back at him the way Ray had looked at him on the mat at Ironside. The referee brought them together. The instructions, the touch of gloves, step back. The bell rang. Foss came forward. He was a pressuring fighter by nature and by disposition, and he came forward the way he always came forward, with intention and volume, filling the space between them with activity, making himself large and present and unavoidable. He threw a jab, a low kick, another jab. He moved his head. He changed levels slightly, not yet committing to the entry, but suggesting it, feeling for the response. Cole moved. He moved the way Ray had shown him to move, with economy, without excess, relocating precisely enough to be where the strikes weren't, without using more space than necessary. He was reading Foss the way he'd been learning to read things, not looking at the hands or the feet or the eyes as separate data points, but reading the whole person, the weight distribution, the pattern of breathing, the way Foss was organized at any given moment. What he read was a man who was working. Not hard in the way that high competence could sometimes look like work. Foss was competent, and what he was doing was technically clean. But hard in the sense that there was visible effort in it, visible expenditure. Cole recognized it because he had been that man himself. Because 3 months ago, he would have been fighting this exact fight from the inside of it. The constant activity, the filling of space, performing readiness rather than simply being ready. Foss landed a jab, clean on the chin, the right amount of snap. Cole felt it register without being moved by it. He had been hit harder in sparring on bad Wednesdays. He moved back one step, reset, looked at Foss. Foss was encouraged by the jab. He came a little harder, a little more invested in the idea that he was finding something. He threw the jab again and changed levels behind it and started to come back up with the right hand. Cole was not there. He had moved a small movement, the kind Ray had spent 7 weeks building into him, the kind that didn't look like much from the outside because it used exactly the necessary amount of space and no more, and Foss's level change had committed him, and the right hand came up into empty air. In the quarter second of that commitment, while Foss was still organizing himself from the recovery, Cole moved. What he did in the next several seconds was a thing that the 3 commentators at the broadcast table would spend considerable time discussing afterward without reaching a consensus. One called it a clinch variation. One called it a throw. The third, who was older than the other two and had seen more, said simply that he didn't recognize the system and left it at that. What it was what Ray had shown him. Not a technique pulled from a curriculum, not a move with a name that could be looked up in a manual, but an application of what Cole had been building, the understanding of weight and position, and the moment when a person's own commitment becomes the thing that ends them. Foss went down, not gratuitously hard, but hard in the way that was sufficient and no more. He went down and Cole came with him, and the position Cole arrived in was not anything the commentators could categorize. Control, complete control, the kind where the person underneath understands before they do anything that the options available to them have been reduced to one. Foss did not tap immediately. He worked. He worked hard, technically with the genuine competence of a fighter who had prepared correctly and was now discovering that correct preparation sometimes runs into something it wasn't built for. He bridged, he framed, he tried to create the angle for the reversal. Cole moved with every attempt, not countering, anticipating. There was a difference and it lived in the timing. Countering came after. What Cole was doing came before or at exactly the same moment, which from the outside looked the same, but from the inside was entirely different. The round ended with Foss back on his feet. Both of them reset in the center of the cage, the crowd fully awake now and making the noise of a crowd that has seen something it didn't expect and doesn't quite have language for. Cole went to his corner. Gus was already there, water-ready expression saying what his words confirmed: you're there. Don't change anything. You're there. You're. Cole sat on the stool and breathed and looked at the cage floor and thought about nothing specific. Not Foss, not the game plan, not the next round. Just the breath. Just the floor. Just the settled, grounded quality of being exactly where he was without being anywhere else. The stool came out. The bell rang. Foss came out differently in the second round. The volume was lower. The activity was more considered. He was thinking now in a way he hadn't been thinking in the first round, which made him both harder and easier harder, because he was more deliberate easier, because deliberate could be read. He threw a low kick. Testing. Looking for a reaction. Cole checked it. Let it land on his shin instead of his thigh. Absorbed it. Looked at Foss. Foss set up the level change again. More patient this time. More disguised. He changed levels, slowly blending it into his movement, trying to make it look like footwork rather than an entry. Cole watched him. He watched the way he'd learned to watch, reading the whole person, the weight shift that started in the hips before it arrived in the feet, the particular change in Foss's breathing that happened fractionally when he was loading something. He let Foss commit. The right hand came. Cole moved his head inside the angle of it, not away from it. A movement that was counterintuitive and that he could not have made 3 months ago, because 3 months ago he would not have trusted the red enough to move in the direction that felt like more danger rather than less. But the read was right and the movement was right and the punch went past him and Foss was extended, committed, briefly empty. Cole put his shoulder into Foss's chest. The rest happened the way things happen when they're right. Not fast exactly, but efficient, without friction, without effort overcoming resistance, because there was no resistance, because Foss's own momentum and weight had been redirected rather than fought. Foss went to the canvas, and this time Cole arrived in the position that ended things. The forearm. The specific placement Ray had used on him on the blue mat at Ironside, not the popular submission positions that the commentators knew how to name and describe, but the older thing, the more direct thing, the thing that communicated its point without leaving room for misunderstanding. Foss tapped. The referee was between them immediately. Cole was already releasing and standing, already moving backward, already giving Foss the space to recover, the same way Ray had given him space on the mat in Tucson 8 months ago. The crowd noise arrived like a wall. Cole stood in the center of the cage, and the noise fell over him, and he let it be what it was without doing much with it. He raised one hand. He found Gus at the edge of the cage and looked at him. Gus nodded once, the nod that meant exactly what it always meant between them. Yeah, you did it. Good. Cole went to Foss. Foss was up being attended to by his corner with the look on his face that Cole recognized from the inside, the look of a man who has just been somewhere he didn't expect and is still finding his way back. Cole put a hand briefly on Foss's shoulder. Foss nodded. The nod said things that neither of them needed to put into words. The next 20 minutes were the protocol of aftermath. The official announcement, the post-fight interview in the cage, the medical check, the photographs. Cole moved through it with the same settled quality he carried into the building. The post-fight interview was conducted by the promotion's media person, a woman with a microphone and a practiced brightness that served the format well. The crowd was still up, still buzzing. Cole, she said, 18-0, big second-round finish. Take us through what happened in that second round. Cole thought about how to answer this. He thought about what was true and what was sayable, and what was his and what belonged to someone else. He found the takedown entry, he said, the one that ends fights for him. I've been working on the defense for that for 2 months. When he committed to it in the second round, I had the red. And when I had the read, I knew what to do next. She nodded, kept the energy moving. And the finish, that position. The commentators weren't quite sure how to call it. Where does that come from? Cole was quiet for a moment. From someone who taught me something, he said, about how to be in a position completely, about how to make your position so total that there aren't any gaps in it. She moved on. The career trajectory, the ranking implications the next fight. Cole answered everything cleanly and honestly and without performance. Then she said, you've mentioned before that you've been working with some people outside your regular training team this camp. Anyone you want to thank, anyone who contributed to tonight? Cole looked at the camera. He thought about a bench in the back of a gym in Tucson, a folded towel, a vest on a hook, gray eyes that didn't move until they settled, a hand on the back of a neck guiding, not forcing. My head coach, he said, my corner, my training partners at Ironside who push me every day. He paused. And there's one more person. He doesn't want me to say his name, so I won't. But I want to say something that he told me because he told me it was true, and I found out that it is. The crowd had quieted enough to listen. The camera was on him. He said Cole continued that the room already knows. You don't have to tell them. You just need to be it. He looked at the camera for one more moment. Then he thanked the promotion and handed the microphone back. In a small house in a quiet neighborhood on the eastern edge of Tucson, Ray Merritt was in his recliner. The recliner was old, built in a time when furniture was built to last, and Ray had taken care of it the way he took care of things he intended to keep. The footrest was up, his left leg was on a pillow, the knee elevated the way the surgeon had specified, which Ray had followed with the same precision he brought to everything else, because following it correctly was the correct thing to do. The television was small, not because he couldn't afford a larger one, but because he had never seen a reason for one. A television's job was to put moving images and sound in a room, and this one did that job. There was a can of beer on the side table. One can. Ray drank one beer in the evenings when he was watching something, had done so for years, and had never seen a reason to change this. The lamp in the corner was on. Outside the window, Tucson was doing what Tucson did in the evening, the desert going cool after the day's heat, the sky in the west still holding the last red of the sun. The neighborhood quiet in the way that older neighborhoods in desert cities went quiet after dark. Ray had watched the card from the first fight. He watched the undercards the way a craftsman watches someone else work with professional attention, noting what was right and what wasn't. When the co-main ended, he got up to use the bathroom and get the beer from the kitchen, moving carefully with the cane. The knee less troublesome tonight than it had been in the morning, but still making itself known. He settled back in the recliner. He got his leg elevated. He cracked the beer. Cole Drayden was introduced. Ray watched him walk to the cage. He watched the walk the way he'd watched everything about Cole over 7 weeks, reading what was there without layering anything over it. The walk was right. Not dramatically right, not obviously right to anyone who hadn't been watching as specifically as Ray had been watching, but right in the way that the small foundational things are, right when someone has done the real work, the weight, even the pace, unhurried, the quality of presence that said this man is here and he knows what he's here for. Ray took a sip of his beer. The first round played out in front of him. He watched Cole move. He watched the economy of it, the way Cole was using the space, not retreating, but relocating. not waiting, but reading. He watched the control position and the way Cole came out of it when the round ended back to center without excess. The young man had done the work. This was the simple truth of it. You could give someone everything and they could still not do the work, could take what was given and file it somewhere and never build it into the body. Cole had built it in. Ray could see it the way a man can see his own work in something, not pride exactly, but a specific recognition, the way you recognize the shape of something you made. Second round, the setup, the entry, the right hand going past Cole's head inside the angle. The finish. Ray watched the finish. He set the beer down on the side table. He leaned forward slightly in the recliner, which for Ray was a significant thing, a departure from his usual stillness. He watched the position Cole arrived in, and he watched Cole hold it, and he watched the tap. He sat back. The post-fight interview began. Ray watched Cole answer the questions. He watched the stillness in Cole's face, the way the words came without performance, without the running self-commentary that had been Cole Drayden's texture when he'd first walked into Ironside. That was gone. Not replaced by something artificial, just gone the way scaffolding comes down when the building is finished and doesn't need it anymore. Then the question about the people outside the regular training team. Ray picked up the beer. He listened to Cole say what Cole said, the name he didn't give, the thing he'd been told that he was passing on. The room already knows. You don't have to tell them. You just need to be it. Ray held the beer in his hand. He looked at the small television, the lights of the arena behind Cole, the crowd, the microphone, the camera. Cole looking directly into it without flinching, without performing, without any gap between the words and the person saying them. Ray had said those words to Cole once. Once at the door of a gym in Tucson, at the end of an evening, the dry air coming in off the desert, the parking lot lights making small circles on the asphalt. He had said them the way he said most things, because they were true and because they were what the moment needed and for no other reason. Cole had kept them, had found out what they meant in the body rather than just the head, had used them at the right moment in the right way for the right reason, not to perform wisdom, but because they were simply what was true, and he had nothing to hide behind anymore, and so truth was what came out. Ray turned the television off. He sat in the recliner in the dark room. The lamp in the corner was still on. The beer was still in his hand, half full. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. The desert to the east was dark and cool and enormous. In the way that deserts are enormous at night, the scale of it different from the daytime scale, more present, somehow more itself. He sat with it for a while. Not the active forward motion of thinking, but present with what was there. The particular quality of an evening when something has concluded correctly. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, but the way that good work concludes quietly with the simple weight of completion. He set the beer down. He put the footrest of the recliner down. He planted his right foot on the floor, then his left, carefully letting the knee settle and find its position. He reached for the cane from beside the recliner and then did not use it. Stood on his own for a moment, both feet flat weight, distributed the way he'd always distributed it, the way he'd been distributing it for 44 years. The knee complained. He let it complain. It would be better in the morning. He walked to the kitchen without the cane, one careful step at a time, the house quiet around him. He put the half-full beer in the refrigerator. He filled a glass of water from the tap and drank it, standing at the kitchen counter, looking out the small window above the sink, at the dark backyard, the shapes of the desert plants in the moonlight, the flat black sky above the roofline with its arrangement of stars that was different from the arrangement you saw in other parts of the country. Cleaner, more of them, the kind of sky that reminded you of how much was out there, that didn't know or care about any particular evening in any particular house. Then he turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. The morning after Cole got back to Tucson, he went to Ironside before it opened. He sat in the parking lot in his car, the engine off, the October morning, still cool enough that he had the windows down. The mountains to the east were taking on the first light in the way they did at this time of year. Slowly, the light coming up the slopes from the bottom, the peaks still dark, while the lower elevations went rust and amber, and the color of old copper left out in weather. Gus had texted the night before. Take a few days. Rest. We'll debrief next week. Cole had texted back, I'll be in tomorrow morning. The gym opened at 6. At 5:50, Cole got out of the car and stood in the parking lot for a moment looking at the building. The sign above the door. The windows dark, still no lights inside yet. The empty lot around him. The smell of the desert in the early morning, dry and clean, and carrying something from a long distance. He went to the door and waited. At 6 exactly, the assistant trainer unlocked it from the inside and pushed it open and looked at Cole with the expression of someone who was not entirely surprised to see him. Cole went in. The lights were still on, half power, the morning warm-up setting that the gym held until the first session started. He dropped his bag near cage 2. He walked to the back of the gym. Ray's bench was there, the folded towel, the hook on the wall above it empty. The vest wasn't there, which meant Ray hadn't arrived yet. The neoprene knee brace sat on the bench, unstrapped, waiting in the way that equipment waits for the person who knows how to use it. Cole stood in front of the bench for a moment. Then he sat down. He sat where Ray sat, at the far left end of the bench, where the towel was, where the water bottle usually stood, where a man had been sitting every morning for 7 months, going on 8, doing the patient daily work of a body in recovery, and asking nothing from the people around him, and giving without knowing. He was giving it something that couldn't have been asked for or planned. Cole sat there, and the gym filled up slowly around him. Fighters came in. The lights went to full power. The morning session noise began to assemble itself, feet on mat, gloves on bags, the sound of a gym waking up to another day of work. He sat there, and he didn't do anything, and he didn't say anything. He just sat, present, in the bench, in the corner, in the piece of Ironside that had become over 7 weeks the most important territory in his world. At 8:20, the main door opened. Ray came in, the cane in his right hand, the slight lean to the left, the gray beard and the ponytail, and the morning stillness that he wore the way other men wore the things they'd always worn. He had the vest on. He nodded to the woman at the front desk and walked toward the back of the gym. He was 15 feet from the bench when he saw Cole sitting on it. He stopped. He looked at Cole on the bench, not long, not with any visible reaction, just with the complete quality of attention he brought to things. The attention of a man deciding about something rather than merely seeing it. Cole looked back at him. He didn't say anything. He didn't stand up, didn't move to make room, didn't explain why he was there. Ray walked the rest of the way to the bench. He reached up and took the vest off one arm, then the other, folded it once along the center seam, and hung it on the hook above the bench. He sat down. Not at the other end beside Cole, a foot of space between them, the same way Cole had sat beside Ray 8 months ago, when he'd come back the morning after the mat and asked without knowing exactly what he was asking for to learn something. The gym moved around them. The fans came on. The morning session started in cage 1. The heavy bags along the east wall picked up their rhythm. The full layered sound of a serious gym at work filled the space from wall to wall. The sound that meant people were here doing real things, building something in their bodies that would be tested eventually and would either hold or wouldn't. Ray picked up his water bottle. He took a drink. He set it back down. Cole sat beside him and looked at the gym. At the cages, the bags, the mirrors along the west wall showing everything in reverse. At the fighters working serious and focused, doing what they'd come here to do. At the morning light moving across the floor from the south windows. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing that needed saying. Everything that could have been said had been said or had happened in the space between words, or existed in 7 weeks of 40-minute sessions on the back mat, or in a parking lot in Tucson at 8:30 in the evening with taillights going east, or on a blue canvas square where a 28-year-old man had found out that what he thought he knew was not the same as what he actually knew. Ray sat. Cole sat. The gym worked around them. The morning light came through the high south windows and moved across the floor in the slow way it moved at this time of year. Low-angle long shadows, the particular quality of October light in the desert that belonged only to October and would be different next month and had been different last month and was exactly what it was right now. They sat like that for a while. 2 men on a bench in the back corner of a gym in Tucson, Arizona. One of them old, one of them not. both of them exactly where they were without being anywhere else in the stillness that belongs to people who have learned at whatever cost, by whatever road, what it means to simply be present in a room and let the room already know.